I'm a planner, and that means I kind of like to get by myself and get up here in places like this attic and just get away from everything, get away from the hustle and bustle, and kind of figure out my life, figure out what I need to do when I get down, and get a plan or an agenda. And to be honest, I've always been that way. That's just who I am. That's how I've always been. Even when I was a little kid, I never really got mad that I had to do stuff that I didn't want to do. I would just get really ticked off that people didn't give me time to plan. And it's just who I was. Now, I wasn't the kid that was walking around school with a day planner, like, writing everything in my day planner. In fact, when we went to college, they gave us a whole bunch of day planners, and they were like, get a control of your life and all that kind of stuff. And I just threw mine away because I wasn't going to be a part of their system. But it didn't change me. I mean, I'm a planner just by me being who I am. It's just who I am. I'm a planner. Now, I don't know about you, but I see a pattern kind of in our culture. The type A planning people, personalities like me, we love to argue. We love confrontation or to debate. I mean, whatever you want to call it, we love it. And I don't know why, but I think it's just the truth. I went to college with a whole bunch of people like me, and they all love to argue. Whether you're friends, enemies, whatever. Everybody loved to sit down and just argue, be confronted with all kinds of stuff. Everyone had an argument, everyone had an opinion, everyone had an agenda. When you think about it, that's what being a planner is. It's about having an agenda. I mean, we all want to know what we're doing, when we're doing it, and why we're doing it, right? I mean, for gut level honest, that's who we were brought up to be the kind of people that have an idea of where they're going and know what they need to do to get through life. So, I mean, even you think about it, even when you enter into kindergarten, you're taught how to organize and all those kinds of things. Even the most free-spirited person like my wife, you have to have some sort of plan or some sort of agenda, even just to make it through our society, especially to make it out of high school. So remember last week we talked about the culture that Jesus grew up in? We talked about how they were really obsessed with the idea of living in harmony with God. We talked about how the rock stars of that culture, it wasn't the pro athletes, or it wasn't the best fishermen, it wasn't even the political leaders. The rock stars of that culture were the rabbis. Well, just with the nature of their system, the rabbis tended to be the A students, the ones who excelled. They were the planners. Now what's crazy is, one day, one of these big shot, smart guy, keeper of the law kind of guys comes to Jesus and tries to debate him. Because remember, planners always like to debate, they're like me. And so he comes to him and wants to debate him, and Jesus shuts him down. Now after Jesus shuts him down, he gives him this illustration. Now before we look at that illustration, I want to fill you in on the cliff notes about this conversation between this man and Jesus. See, the big shot comes to Jesus and he asks a question. Now, that's not a big deal, except for this was a loaded question. This question had an agenda attached to it. And so this guy, who is a letter of the law type guy, he probably spends his whole life organizing what he does around keeping the law, making God happy. He asked Jesus, what is the most important law? And that's the issue. That's the agenda. See, this guy had probably dealt with this question his entire life. He probably has way too many answers. He probably has some of the best answers for this question. In this moment, this man was asserting dominance in this field, and at the same time putting Jesus on the spot. So Jesus answers him brilliantly. He says, here's what you need to do. You need to love God with everything you have, and then he tagged on, and love your neighbors just like they were you. And so in this moment, Jesus is saying, okay, big shot, I know more than you about this issue. I mean, after all, he's God. And so Mr. Big Shot, trying to kind of take dominance back or assert himself more into the situation, he asked him another question. He said, well, then who's my neighbor? And Jesus says this, check this out. In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road. When he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 silver coins, gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said. When I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert of the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. It's almost like nothing even needs to be said after that, but let me give it a shot. See, Jesus is telling us who our neighbor is, right? I mean, we tend to see ourselves in that story as the people that walk down the side of the road, or maybe even the Good Samaritan. But Jesus asks a different question. He says, who is the man's neighbor? He shows us that who our neighbor is not determined by geography, it's determined by generosity. See, this story shows us a whole lot more than just who our neighbor is. Jesus paints this picture of us twice in this story. The priest and the Levite, both of them walk past the man in need. And why? Because they're bad people? They're not bad people. They were the good guys in the society. They were good. What it comes down to is they had an agenda, and that their agenda left no room for other people. More than that, what Jesus was saying is that how we treat other people is directly connected to our relationship with God. See, if you would have asked these guys, the truth is they probably would have had a really good plan, and their plan would have been centered around making God happy or keeping God kind of satisfied in their lives. But the truth is they were so into their plans, so into their own agenda, that they missed out on God completely. Now, if you talk to the priest or the Levite of the story, they'd probably give you a good excuse, maybe something that they had pressing that they had to do. Maybe they'd tell you that Jesus is right and how you treat other people is super important, but they'd already reached their quota, or maybe they serve people in a different way. I mean, the truth is, you can justify pretty much anything. So what it comes down to is we have the choice to either justify living life for myself or engage in something more. Listen, this is a lesson for all of us. And we all tend to go through life looking out for number one, go through life with our own agenda. But when we have our own agenda and we're so focused on that, we can miss out on some of the biggest opportunities that God wants to use in our lives to change us and to work through us. So the question is, are you going to just live life justifying what you do? Or are you going to engage in something more?